Jessica Rehfield, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Rabbi Josh. I'm so excited.
It is my pleasure and honor. And I thought that I'd like to start by reading your artist statement.
Spectacular.
And exploring some of the questions that come out of that for me.
What?
So Jessica writes at Rehfield.com, by the way. JessicaRehfield.com is where I found this. You should all go there immediately and look at it. But it says, in my work, both community-oriented and individual, I strive to share unknown histories and confront the state of miseducation about Jewish and queer people by sharing information about both identities and creating opportunities for queer and Jewish artists. My work involves introducing the public to ideas and people they may not have had an opportunity to engage with in the formats of artwork, artist talks, and events and exhibitions. And there's more to it, but I wanted to just talk about that because one of the things that I've been exploring on this podcast is the role is whether art and Jewish art has like a moral purpose or a cultural purpose or a political purpose. And obviously every artist is going to answer that differently. But it seems like you come to your work with an end in mind. And I just wanted to know if you can tell me like how you developed in that direction, or has your art always been kind of purposeful in that way?
Yeah, that is a pretty good encapsulation of where my work has been for maybe, I would say, since 2019 is when I graduated from my graduate studies in Oregon College of Art and Craft in Portland. And honestly, my work at its core, I would say, Josh, is about identity. And so for myself, that is like there's a very, very broad history of artists working with identity and investigating the self and investigating what it means to be who you are. And when I started honing in on that topic for myself in grad school in particular, it was during the first Trump administration shit show. I didn't ask if we're allowed to say shit show, but I'm hoping that is.
Remember, I have beep control, but no, yes, you're allowed to say shit show, but only if you're talking about the Trump administration.
Yeah, unfortunately, I am only talking about the Trump administration right now. So I definitely was feeling this urgency within myself that I think a lot of people have keyed into also, to start investigating more strongly when you are part of marginalized communities. You want other people to hear, see, and engage with about the communities that you exist within. It is about representation. So when I started my, grad program, there was a lot about fascism and American complicity with, the Nazis, and trying to bring that to the surface of, hey, I am a queer Jewish person. I'm a queer Jewish artist. It's very difficult to reflect on my life experience and the knowledge that I have of myself and both of those communities without expressing about that, without representing in my artwork. So that's kind of where that started out.
I see. That's really fascinating. But let me ask, was the study of fascism was in your art program?
It was in my personal research and yes. So I wish that it was in the art program, because that's kind of what the moral of my thesis became was, hey, fuckers, open your eyes, look out, look at what's happening. And I've just actually been talking with people about this, yesterday, today, 2025, September 8th, September 7th. I just talked with some people about this yesterday. I feel like I've been screaming trying
Yeah.
through my work
Yeah.
to raise awareness about the impact of, fascistic government for years. So it's like very, very, and also I want to mention that the work that I did in that program was very individual. That was me working things out with charcoal on paper, reading, looking at history. But my work developed into more community oriented, which is where that from my statement, it became more interesting for me to have conversation with either viewers of work, or it also morphed into incorporating community collaboration into projects. Because
And is that because was that through the artistic lens or the political lens? Because like it needs to be a collective response to fascism. Is that why the work started to become more public, or whatever the word is?
Correct. Yes, I think that it is. For me, art is political. It's inexorable. I cannot separate politics and art because of who I am, because of my identity. And personally, I've always ascribed that to being Jewish. That I feel very highly politically vocal. I've felt that is one of the tones of my soul, I would say.
Tell me about that. How is that a Jewish part of your soul? Why is the political thing emerged from a part of you or your Jewishness?
Yeah, and I love these questions because this is like literally what I think about in my art all of the time. So thank you so much
I love these conversations, and I love how you think about it. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. In art history, when you take an art history class, for example, I mean, I'm talking about 25 years ago when I was in college. So hoping that this is still what is happening. There's always a shift when you start talking about the art of Jewish artists, because the only place that we look at the art of Jewish artists is artists during the World War II era. And the reflection of the environment and the reflection of the experience that comes out of the work of Jewish artists at that time. And people who were also reflecting about the war, the fascism through their work, those are themes that become apparent when you start looking at that period of time. And I think part of my identification with Jewish artists being vocal, it might have been that Jewish artists are in art history kind of relegated to this reflection of political experience. And to get at the core of why I feel that Jewish identity and politics are inseparable, I think that honestly it is part of our identification within our own community. When we look at our history, there's kind of this, hey, well, we've always had to speak out against injustice because that's what we were experiencing. If we want so honestly, it's a much bigger tradition than just myself. But when I was growing up, I think that I definitely identified with my Jewish identity. My belief is that to be Jewish is to be vocal. I know that is not every Jewish person's experience. It is but I do identify very highly with people who have sounded alarms in the.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because, you were talking about the response to fascism in the 20th century. But I think what's underneath your comments is I do think that the Jewish tradition is inherently political. That doesn't mean that it has simple answers to, contemporary political divisions. But, the Judaism of the Torah is essentially communal. Moses, just to get biblical for a minute. Moses has the opportunity to stay up on the mountain and just meditate with God, but Moses insists that he has to go back down with the people. And so
Yeah,
Jewish law is inherently communal, which makes it inherently political. So I do think it has that stripe in it. So for
absolutely.
you, like if we talk about an artist like, and to raise the cautionary flag, I don't know anything about this particular artist or Jewish artists in general, but to me, like Mark Rothko seems to be apolitical. You don't identify with that kind of Jewish artist because it's not engaged enough in the world. I might be misrepresenting Rothko, but certainly not obviously political.
I see what you're saying. And yes, his work, I've actually, I'm glad you picked him because he is one artist that I know a little bit more about than other artists. And yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. And I'm recognizing in myself that I just have a highly political lens when I look at everything. And I maybe it's because of the time that we're living in, it's gotten a little bit supercharged, and it's helpful for me to recognize, yes, that is my lens. But I guess like apolitical, I have a difficult time with that because not just with Rothko, but with everyone. And people are going to either love this or hate this that what I'm about to say. I don't think anything is apolitical. You could try to be removed, and unfortunately the wheels of politics, and even with the word politics, what that refers to, it changes and it shifts, but we're all part of that community. We do have an effect in our life, regardless of where you stand. And so then I think the division is whether you are vocally political or not.
And so I guess maybe the distinction is somebody deliberately and in a self-aware manner responding with some kind of political voice. So maybe that's the distinction.
Yeah, I think people would feel more comfortable to sort themselves into that. I am vocally political, or if you're saying I'm apolitical, I don't want to be vocally political. I would like to insert that I've just completed this talk and doing research about Jewish American culture contributors. And Mark Rothko was in my last talk. I actually have two parts to this talk series now. And I think, with all respect to Mark Rothko, I would like to remind people that his original name is, I'm gonna skew it, but it's Marcus Rothkowitz.
Yeah.
And I think that it's political that he changed his name. Family changed his name. So it's inherent. It's already, this is why I think that Jewish existence, unfortunately, it's politicized.
Yeah, because I like that, because I think, just to name that, because I think that one of the things that our conversation illuminates is that there have been multiple Jewish responses. And obviously every community, every ethnic community can make the same claim, but my focus is the Jewish community.
Yes.
The Jewish people had multiple responses to the forces of modernity. Some folks had a kind of universalistic response, or wanting an assimilationist response, like that was the best way to address Jewishness in the modern context. Other people dove very deeply into Jewish particularism as their response to modernity. Some people became, very self-consciously political. Other people went another route. So, yeah, I think there's not a Jewish way to be, but Jessica's Jewish way is tapping into the engagedness and the politicalness inherent in the Jewish tradition. I want to go back a few steps and talk about identity. How I have, and the same is true for you, and for everybody, I have a bunch of different identities, right? I could identify myself as a Jew. I could identify myself as an Oregonian. I could identify myself as somebody who was born in Portland, as a liberal, as whatever it might be. How do we how does one, or maybe just at the risk of putting you on the spot, how did you decide which are the aspects of your identity that deserve your voice, your attention, the resources of your creativity, your commitment?
And I love that question because it is true. I think this is a very interesting question for everyone. How do you identify most strongly? And then if you're an artist, why is it that you're foisting XYZ identity in front of? Okay, so my answer to that, and I wanted to just backtrack on your backtrack for a second. The reason that I have become, like vocal, etc., is because I want to inter-community have these conversations. It's not just about being Jewish and talking to Jewish people, although I love doing that. The focus of my work had become recently extending these conversations into non-Jewish communities, non-Jewish spaces, because of the risk of not just erasure, but the lack of knowledge of a minority, and the tendency toward demonization and dehumanization comes when there is a lack of knowledge of, and so we have to pop our heads up. We have to be present so that dovetails with my answer for this.
Like you're saying, like we have an obligation, not only to ourselves, you're saying, but we have a broader obligation to speak up for ourselves.
Yes. Personally, I feel I have that obligation because I am an artist that has been making public work. I've been engaging with the public. So my answer to your second question is that they're trying to erase us as queer people. I'm a queer person. I am queer. I queerly identify. I'm a big old queer Jew. Okay.
Okay.
That is an identity for me, big old queer Jew. I also am part of a community, the queer community, that is under attack. And that is not hyperbole. That is very literal. And I'm not exaggerating in any way. Our government and culture is trying to erase queer people.
Yes.
Well, for me, that dovetails with, being Jewish, right? So from my experience, and as a person who is making something that other people are going to look at and engage with, I have to right now speak out about these identities because they are under attack.
Right. But just to draw you out a little bit more. So when you say that the queer people are being silenced, or there's an attempt to silence queer people, and that dovetails with Judaism, you mean because Jews are also being silenced? Or how does it dovetail? What do you mean?
I'm sorry. Historically.
I got it. It's an echo.
Yes. And I have said this in my work in the past, and actually during the collab, art lab residency and fellowship, the experience of persecution. The experience of being persecuted is parallel. And I want to be bold and say this is something that Jewish people, the Jewish community, have in common with every marginalized community as well. We don't get that recognition, I think, often in terms of social justice advocacy. That is something that I think is abhorrent, and I am also making work to uplift the experience of Jewish people as experiencing a dual experience of being an ethnic minority and also living as part of the American population. Like, we have that in common with every marginalized minority community. And then if you're also a queer person who is a Jewish person, there's also persecution within our own community. And so there not just persecution, but there are difficulties, and your identity is questioned, or it can be questioned. I've experienced massive support. I've experienced loving care from within the Jewish community when I speak out as a queer person. I have been held by Jewish communities as a queer person. But these are the things that, as a person who, not just myself, but everyone who experiences discrimination, that's something that Jewish people and queer people and people from other marginalized communities, we have discrimination in common.
It sounds like for you, one of the answers is if one of our identities is
being attacked,
facing marginalization or oppression, that's the part we need to respond.
And that's the part that I respond to. And personally, Josh, it's because I feel like my skin is being flayed off. Mm-hmm. I have to say in my work, hey, do you realize what's happening in front of your face? But for some reason, it's being ignored or overlooked or downright shut down and oppressed. It's not that everyone else needs to, but personally, the person that I am, and as we've discussed, my education, the places that I've had resonance within art history and moving forward into community-based projects, it's because there is persecution aimed at these parts of myself, resisting oppression by expressing but it doesn't always have to look. I actually recently talked with another artist while I was in Florida. He was a gay man. His way of resistance, he didn't want to talk about being mad. He didn't want to talk about a response of anger or anything like that to the things that we're seeing right now. He wanted to uplift color and joy and beauty. So for his actions are less about speaking even and just making work.
That on his terms, and
very clearly screamed, I'm gay. But
so do you want to give voice to some of what you're responding to, like some of the experience of erasure or persecution in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, these are topics that I could talk about all day long, and we only have, so much time.
Yeah.
I mean, there are real attacks on rights for members of the trans community.
Right.
In the most top-down fashion. There are cancellations of programs and funding and just vicious attacks about who transgender people are, what transgender people do. And again, we have to fight it with knowledge. We have to fight it with, it's unfortunate that, we can't necessarily change laws being passed by reaching out and saying, hey, have you ever met a transgender person? Here, let's host a talk where people can, hear from a person about their experience of being transgender. That's not going to immediately change the way that people in senates or, houses are voting. But the fact is that they are voting to oppress people's liberties. So that is a very real, and it unfortunately, this has been swelling in our political environment for, it's not just 2025 that this is happening. This is a backlash.
Yeah, it's been building. Backlash. Yeah, for sure. And also I would add to what you're saying, not to diminish legislative responses, but also just there's a rhetorical nastiness that is also very dangerous.
Yes, dehumanization of trans people. This is what I'm talking about with the fascistic tendencies. It's the rhetoric. And oh my God, I am so sorry. Baruch Hashem. I went to Florida. I ended up being subjected to Fox News for a lot more than I do not like to polarize. So I'm not trying to demonize Fox News, but holy shit, the things that I heard and saw within one program on Fox News, I was just I cannot believe some of the things that they're broadcasting. Just
Yeah.
straight hate speech. These are tactics that are being used to dehumanize, and it's resulting in violence. It's resulting in, and so I think you were maybe getting at also, like, what is it like to be a Jewish artist at this time, or just a Jewish person in general? Because it's not just the queer community that is experiencing discrimination. And as a person who has openly made my Jewish identity part of my artist identity, part of my work,
Yeah.
part of the things that I have presented publicly, it has been an interesting, difficult, challenging period. I have worked very hard to uplift communities in my projects, communities and queer communities.
Yeah.
I have made a lot of opportunities happen for artists, and I have received some what I believe to be anti-Semitic treatment from other artists.
Right. I mean, it's
been really challenging, but I am growing.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, almost every artist I've spoken with for this podcast has had that experience, and it's like you were saying how queer your response to queer persecution dovetails with the Jewish persecution.
Always has, and that's what people need to understand. It always has.
What's interesting about the Jewish thing, about the Jewish voice, is that it's both from both the left and the right. There's, one is walking this line.
Yeah.
As a Jewish person, because of the anti-Semitism on the political left that's broadcast itself over the last couple of years, especially, but not only since October 7th, but certainly it's been amplified. So that's been a really difficult thing for artists.
I would say coming from everywhere. I don't even say left or right anymore. It's just kind of become acceptable again, which is really disappointing for me. As a person in these communities, I'm like, do you all have the memory of a goldfish? Do we?
So let's use that as a bridge. One of the things that's striking about your work is your inclusion and use of Yiddish and very Jewish themes in your work. Talk to me a little bit about what role Yiddish plays in your life. You have a strong affection for it, but it's more than that. It's part of who you are. So talk to us about it.
My work with Yiddish started during the pandemic. I've always had an eye to my family's heritage, my family's history. My grandparents were New Yorkers, New York Jews, and their grandparents had immigrated from what is now Germany. It was on a border area that was then was Poland and Germany and Poland. And so Yiddish, let me say this. I learned Hebrew with my dad as a younger person, and then I did not continue study of Hebrew. And during the pandemic, I had this urge, and I don't know where it came from. I just had this urge, and I was like, I really want to kind of look back into like Hebrew, but more Yiddish. And as an artist, language is something that inspires me to think about how we ascribe meaning to things, how we describe meaning. We describe with language, and language has always been one of my major inspirations. I love letters. I love breaking down language. Well, so I don't know why
you use letters and language in your paintings.
Yes, absolutely. During the pandemic, I ended up volunteering for a language school, a Yiddish language school online, and was enrolled in a Yiddish immersion program for 1 week. It ended up being something that I could totally commit to because we were all at home at that time. And it probably would never have entered my life if it weren't for the pandemic, which isn't, I'm not saying thank you, pandemic, but
Right.
it,
Right. You're not saying that was a positive experience, but it did afford you this
yes,
opportunity.
it did mean that I connected with this community that is full of language learners and people who were sharing their experience as Yiddish teachers across two students across the world. It really connected for me when my memories of having learned Hebrew letters started coming out while I was doing an Aleph base class with the Yiddish. It's called Fun Bereshit, right from the beginning. Fun Bereshit, Aleph base. I had no idea that it was inside of me. It's like these letters. I was having these like, brain explosions. Like, oh, I remember, these letters, and it was so profound for me to experience that connection. And then fast forward 5 years later, I'm still taking a class with that Aleph base teacher. We have formed this little Havruta. Is it Havruta?
Yep. Yeah, Havruta, yeah, paired partnership learning.
Yep. Of course, it inspired me to do a project, and that's when I penned a Yiddish primer, because as an artist, you're always reflecting, or at least my experience of being an artist, I'm reflecting on what I'm encountering in life, and then I want to dive into it. I want to dive deeply, and so I applied and I did a residency with the Arts Center in Corvallis. I was down in a basement, like at midnight, scribbling away. And they had these magnetic walls. It's like the funniest thing. It was an old church basement, but the walls, it's been repurposed as an education center. So the walls are these metal plates on the walls. And I was putting together the pages of this primer, and I illustrated it. And it's written in Yiddish with English translation as well as transliteration, because the class.
Where can people get it?
I am trying so hard to have it published, and I'm on the verge of self-publishing because I've been trying to go traditional publishing routes, and it's not out yet, but it will be. Okay. It will be, and it's called Mein Knädel, which means my dumpling, but also my matzo ball. It's about.
Right.
It's the story of making matzo balls, because again, that is one of my most beloved identity things. So yeah.
It's interesting though. It's interesting because you grow up with Yiddish, but you had the sense of like recovering this part of your history.
And in my wild research of, when I do a project, when I have an inspiration, I'm researching from every angle. I started looking into, why is this so important to me? Why is it important that the primer, the reason that I wrote it was because I was in these classes with people who grew up with some Yiddish in their household, people who are children of people who survived the Holocaust. And so in the classes that I was taking, and mind you, these are all internet-based classes. So there are people from Massachusetts, New York, Baltimore, New Jersey, Israel. There are people from all over the world trying to reconnect with their Yiddish-speaking heritage, whom primarily were older than myself. I'm like, one of the younger people in these classes. There are people who grew up with Yiddish in their household, but they never learned to read. It wasn't. They weren't taught to read in Yiddish. They could hear, they could recognize, but they can't write or read. And so for me, because, I'm an artist, and I was like, I'm going to write a book that will help adults learn to read. Right. So it's like a weird, it's an generation thing. So
it's for people who kind of have the language in them in some way, but don't have the capacity to read. That's such a gift, because it's such an enormous gulf between the generations. I have in my possession 2 notebooks that I believe are from my great grandfather, although they may have been my grandfather's, that are written in Yiddish. They're like journals, and I want to have them translated at some point, but it's like this inheritance I have from my family, and I can't access
it, but you can't. And that's
yeah. So
well, I am getting more familiar with Yiddish scripts. So if you want me to take a look at them sometime, I can tell you letter by letter what it is. I can
that's
tell you
great.
all of
That's
the
great.
words, what the vocabulary
I
means.
get it. So now, just before we started recording, you and I were talking about the Yiddish Book Center, and it's just in Massachusetts. And really, for people who are listening who've never heard of the Yiddish Book Center, and if you listen to the podcast, you may remember when I had Lou Cove on. Lou Cove spent a lot of the time talking about his experience at the Yiddish Book Center because Yiddish is so important, and I think a lot of folks don't know this, not only because it's the language of the European Jewry going back, and it's kind of our inheritance in that way, but culturally, as an artistic community, when we talk about Jewish culture and secular culture over the last 100+ years, it really is Yiddish culture. I mean, that's all these plays and short stories and politics and socialism and all of this stuff came out of Yiddish culture, and it was self-consciously a Yiddish expression of Jewish life.
Yes, Yiddish is, I like to say, this is a little phrase I came up with while I was doing all this study. It occurred to me, English is a language of colonization. Yiddish is a language of immigration. It's because that was exported. It's because it was forced. It's because it was installed, and it wasn't the original language for so many people. Well, Yiddish is like a language of home that was imported, and it turns out, like when I was doing these studies, there would have been losing Yiddish would be losing our connection to that world that was almost destroyed purposefully. And that's one of the things too, is that I don't think people know this about Yiddish, but it was used to identify people for extermination. If someone spoke Yiddish, that was a way to identify them as Jewish. Right. But also, it is this language that imported, a person, not just one, so many, but worldviews and perspectives. So that's where I was talking about what language is and why it's so inspiring for me. Language is a viewpoint. And when people say that they love Yiddish because it's so snarky, or it's so, the people who have a outside perspective on what Yiddish is, it's like the pop perspective of what Yiddish is. But they know schlep, and they know those words are also part of American culture because of and so everybody likes to affect this kind of Jewishly kind of a thing, like, I'm gonna do my spiel, I'm gonna kibitz, and it's like kind of like pop, and it's kind of chic. But that's where I'm like, well, do you guys realize where this came from? Right. And the same goes for bagels. Like, even the word bagel, people are speaking, bagel means like a ring. And people, it's not just Yiddish. Obviously, there's, Yiddish is I like to say that from my studies, Yiddish and German are cousins. They're not the same. And Yiddish, alongside German and Dutch and English, they're all from the same Proto-Germanic root language, supposedly. But like, people are saying things off Yiddish all the time, and it's an American inheritance in a way, and it spreads across every for sure subculture. But at the same time, like, there's a separation from what the root of that is, where that
because I think a lot of people, listen, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and everybody had every Jew had on their bookshelf like the joys of Yiddish, but it became this language of little phrases that you could throw here and there, but totally divorced from its original, from its true heart, from its true core. It occurs to me that you and I have not talked about how fractured the Jewish world is right now, and we don't really have time to go into it, but you've been talking about the importance of language, and it really is so interesting to think about what would happen if our highly divided Jewish world people on the political right, people on the political left, the cultural left, right, Israel, anti-Zionist, Zionist, if suddenly everybody had this like secret Jewish language that they could speak,
Well, we do.
it would, right, but they don't know, people don't know it. And so it would, I'm not saying it would solve the divisions. Like the Yiddish world was highly divided also, but it also creates a coherent context for the conflict, which we are missing. So it's an enormous loss, but there are a lot of people, in some ways there's been a Jewish renaissance going on for the last 30 years, 40, 50 years. I don't know.
Yeah, we're all learning about what it means to be Jewish through this experience. Right. I think we're all learning about who am I as a Jew? What does that mean to me? Am I Ashkenazi? That's like the surface level. This isn't, when I said we do have a language in common, I will use a Yiddish word, and it's mishpacha. We have a language in common.
Yeah, Emily.
We have a language in common that's the language of our souls.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think it is a call to return to love of one another. The division that we have. We are holding our ideas as weapons. We're holding, I think, the abstracts of what it means to be Jewish as a reality. And under that, the reality is that if you are Jewish, we are a mishpacha.
Yeah, we're a family.
Right. That is
we have to tap into that energy again. You're saying
that Beautiful. Is my answer to because I just did this wonderful it wasn't really training, but a workshop with Canvas about conflict resolution. We have to see each other as human. We have to recognize that, and this goes for. I mean, I'm not going to be, pie in the sky. Say the war could be stopped if we just saw each other as human. But I do think that in the Jewish community, we're all hurting right now. Yeah. We're all hurting and scared, and everybody, you're wrong, I'm right. Those are divisions that could be assisted if we, I think, take a step back and look at who we are again. Look at why these identities are important to us and try to communicate to each other what is important about each other.
Beautiful. That really resonates, and it's a timely kind of message for me and for all of us. It's certainly on my mind, those divisions. So much more to say and explore, but with that, I'm going to turn us to our last kind of two questions and ask you just to tell us one thing that you want to share, one thing you want people to know about, something you love.
Oh my gosh, when you asked me that question, I wanted to mention about the Yiddish in my paintings really quickly.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
I did move from that book, painting the illustrations for that book, to those large scale paintings that I did during the art lab.
For the exhibition.
Yeah. Well, and it was a process of research, and I researched through painting, right? I was doing research through construction of those paintings and what was going to be in the paintings. And it did incorporate Yiddish because I was using Yiddish as a symbol for the body in inhabiting Yiddish, the spirit that is within the letters, the spirit within our language. It is a manifestation of the Jewish body within letters. So that was featured within those paintings.
The Jewish spirit comes to be embodied in the language.
And so there were lots of letters and lots of words within those paintings. And
that's such an interesting idea. Very, very powerful.
Yeah. And there was a lot to those paintings that had to be discussed for it to be understood. But one thing that I've been really loving that I recently learned about, I've been making flags, and flags as an ultimate symbol, right? It is that there is actually a study of flags, or there was a term coined for the study of flags, and I'm going to mess it up again, but it's vexillology. because
Okay.
I think the word is really too complex, and the person who coined it, they could have cut part of that out. It could just be
Okay.
vexillology or vexillology.
Yeah.
But you can be a vexillologist, a
Okay.
researcher of flags, and in my recent projects, both community based and in my individual work, I have been, I guess, studying flags and studying the language of flags and what it means to have a symbol that is personally representative of your identity. So
So
I've
interesting.
become kind of a vexillologist. It's like when you try to pronounce dinosaur names and
Right.
you're like,
Yeah.
inkling,
It's vexing.
it's
It's vexing.
yeah, it's
So,
not.
okay, you want to turn people onto that as an area of exploration. What is the most delicious Jewish food?
This was such a hard question because I love food and I love matzo ball soup. And it seems like such a pat answer, but my favorite is a good salty broth, a delicious matzo ball. There's just something so comforting about it. And
My mouth is
I know,
watering.
right? You can't even think about it.
What's your favorite consistency of the matzo ball? And do you make them yourself?
Oh, yeah. I love rolling the balls. And I like to watch them dancing around. And that's kind of in that book also, the Yiddish book. My favorite consistency is chewy on the inside and fluffy on the outside.
It's hard to beat that. It's got the best of both worlds. Yeah, I grew up with a really fluffy, soft one, so that always feels like home. But over time, I've come to appreciate a little more body in it.
If you need something chewy, I did see an article one time. I think I shared this with you before, and I have to find it again. But it was written by a recent immigrant to the United States who said that Jews, and obviously talking about European, I don't know, Eastern European, Jews need something with a crunch. We need strong food. The food has to have some kind of resistance or a bite. And
yeah, like a real bagel.
Yeah,
like a real bagel.
White bread. We need brown, black bread that it's hard to chew through. And I think that that's true for me too.
I love it. I love it. Jessica, this was so much fun and really interesting. I really appreciate the time that you've given us a lot to think about. And I appreciate your work and I appreciate you making time.
My pleasure. I hope that we talked about something. And
we did. We went to some pretty deep and far places. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.